So we're going to start by talking about stuff. The only stuff that you should need to buy is actually the soil blockers. Notice the dimples on the small soil blocker. That makes an indentation where you can, where the seed can fall when you're planting. You can tell that these have been well used. I think I've been using them for about 10 years now. Next we'll look at the larger size soil blocker. There are actually 3 sizes. I only have the 2 smaller ones of those. Notice the black cubes on the bottom of the large soil blocker. Those cubes are exactly the same size as the cubes that are formed by the small blocker. In our next video, I'll show you how to do the equivalent of potting up, putting the plants from the small blocker into the larger one. This is more stuff, and no, I don't mean the cat. I mean the spaghetti pan that got traded up to be used for potting soil. It was a little too big for the water to boil efficiently on my stove. Potting soil that I use is something called ProMix. I buy a bale or sometimes 2, maybe once, twice a year, and that gets me through all of my potting needs for a season. The thing that I can't stress enough is that this soil has to be made, the potting soil has to be made very, very, very wet. It has peat, so it kind of resists getting wet. However, that's the key to our next steps. If you start with hot water, by the way, it seems to help a little bit and it will absorb a little bit faster, but frequently I just go ahead and put the water in and then let it sit for a while. So again, the soil has to be really, really wet. See how the amount of water that I can squeeze out of it? If you were successful at making mud pies as a child, you may remember how the key to making sandcastles is to have the soil, in this case, really, really wet. And then just pack it tightly in. After you flatten it a bit, then you want to go around, especially in the corners, and poke into each individual cell. Then just place it in your container and use the plunger to release the block. And then you need to separate the cells. The easiest way I've found to do that is to take a large flat knife and use that surface to separate them. This is important because one of the benefits of using soil blocks is that any roots that want to leave the sides of the blocks will actually get air pruned. This is supposed to be better for the plants than the kind of bound up root systems that happen when you put them in pots. That may be why I've been successful with things like beans that aren't supposed to like being started inside because they don't like to have their roots disturbed. So now you see that the cube is well formed. I can hold it in my fingers, I can even tap it lightly, and I'm convinced that the reason why I can do this is because of all the water and the way that it makes it the consistency of a brick. So it's only February out there, and that snow that you see off my patio, there's only a few things that can start this far north in February, but onions are one of those things. So here's more stuff. This shot glass will come in handy for holding small seeds while we work with them. We've got a glass with some water in it. Let's get started. And then there's the toothpick. It doesn't have to be a toothpick. I've also used a bamboo skewer for larger size seeds. What you want to do is you want to try to match up the size of the end of your tool with the seeds. You want to use the water to get the seeds to stick. You don't want to make the seeds wet in the glass, but you want to make them stick long enough to get them to the soil, which is even wetter. And in theory, then they should stick to the soil instead of the toothpick. Occasionally you'll have to do a little twist to get them off. Too wet, they want to clump together, lay them on your surface, spread them out, pick them up one at a time. So here we are. Every little cube has a little black seed in the middle of it. We're almost done. What we need to do is cover them lightly, give them a little bit to grab onto as they grow up. These are small seeds, so it doesn't take very much to cover. And then here's what I've found is best for watering. I tried a spray bottle, but often the spray will dislodge seeds along with wetting the surface, and so I just very gently do some dripping. After we've wetted the surface, then we want to cover it with something that will keep the moisture in place. We want to watch this carefully. We don't want it too wet. If it forms droplets on the top, we should air it out a little bit. Then give the seeds some extra darkness to encourage sprouting.